Hello. Hey. Just a quick question. How you doing? This talk today is really, directed towards um, people who are living below their potential. And I know it's a tough question. What is your potential? And what is my potential in this life? But just imagine that no matter where you are, if you're in complaint, if you're living in fear, if you're um, often angry, if you're in complaint, and yes, if you're in judgment, if you're stressed, if you're depressed, if you seem to be sick all the time, tired all the time, you're likely not living in your full potential. That's, if you feel like a failure, if your mind is full of what ifs, shouldas or couldas, or, why me? We're not really here. We're not living in our full potential. And it would seem that if you've, possibly gone to university and got a degree or two or three, maybe you've even done really, really well financially, have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars at your disposal, and still um, feeling depressed or self-pitying or sad, you know, then then I'm here to say that we're not living in our full potential. So how do we live in our full potential? I think the first thing that we have to recognize if we want to live in our full potential is um, that we're not. That we're not. Now, for the addict or the alcoholic, who I'm often talking to here, it's much easier to see because we're living in the symptoms of the problem. We're still drinking and using and we think, well, if I could just stop drinking and using, I would not be in the problem anymore. Things would get better. And we often think that, and often in the early days, they do get better. It seems like they're getting better, but what needs to change is my thinking. It was Jung actually who said, and in the very early days, or even before Alcoholics Anonymous started, there was a fellow who went to see Jung, and who was a hopeless alcoholic, wealthy man, but an alcoholic, and he'd spent 6 months with Jung, and Jung said, and he'd gone home back to America, quite confident that what he'd learned would help him, but he still had his old thinking, and he was still trying to manage life with his intellect, so he was using his conditioned beliefs, and anyway, the pain of his existence drove him back to drinking, and he went back to see Young, and he said, "What can I do? How come I can't stay sober?" And whether it's sober with drugs or alcohol or food or whatever it is that we do to numb ourselves out, it doesn't really matter. If you're numbing yourself out. If you're coming home and grabbing a beer and sitting in front of the TV, maybe, well, you're okay. I'm not an alcoholic. I just spend every night in front of the TV, or playing video games, or whatever it is that we do, smoking a joint day in and day out, to numb ourselves out. We're numbing ourselves out because we're not happy. We're not. I mean, we're often full of self-hate, and so we don't know how to be here, and that's the key. We don't know how to be here. And Jung said that. He said to that man that he needed to have a complete psychic change, a foundational change, and that the only way for that to happen would be through some sort of a spiritual experience. And that he'd actually been trying to help that man have that experience, but it was a bit beyond his it wasn't really in Jung's wheelhouse, although his teachings, Carl Gustav Jung's teachings, are very spiritually based, and many of his teachings are amazing in that way. Um, So anyway, the guy was, wow. He said, I'm a spiritual guy. I mean, I'm a churchgoer. I should be able to figure this out. And and Jung said, well, no, your beliefs wouldn't do it. That he needed to have an experience. You needed to have a relationship with this higher power. And often we get caught up calling it God. And I don't do that a lot. I mean, I speak of it, and there's many concepts for this higher power: love, the moment, consciousness, awareness, presence. There's so many concepts of what that is, but we need to develop this relationship with this what seems very mystical, but it isn't. It really isn't. So how do we learn, to come into this moment? Well, the first thing is we have to recognize that how we've been living hasn't been working. Period. Full stop. And our ego has conned us, talked us into it, said it's good enough. You're doing as good as you can. This is it. It's all you get. And you don't dare leave the ego to go to the unknown, right? We want to hold on to what we think we know, but it's interesting to live in this idea of the moment, or to live in this idea of trusting in life on life's terms. We have to let go of what we think we know. Yeah. So we have to surrender and to let go of that. And I sometimes I think I sound like a friggin' old preacher, but I'm not a preacher. I'm the guy that this happened to, and I mean, I had all the symptoms. As a kid, I certainly came from a very traumatic home, an alcoholic home. I ended up in the street at 15 and 18 in Toronto and in Vancouver, and I was in the, I didn't go to school. My vision in life was, I owned Harleys, and I was just, wanted to be one of that gang, and I lived in that, I lived really in the what I would call the pit of turmoil, very confused, very angry man, and it took years really for me to awaken to the simple thing that it says in the 12 steps. It says on step 1 that my life was unmanageable, that I was powerless over whatever the substance was, and I had to get that out of my system for sure, but that my life was unmanageable. I could not manage my life with my view of life, with my perception of life. I was full of fear. I couldn't, I used to say I had the Midas touch. Everything I touched turned to shit. So, and so I lived in that for years and years and years, even in recovery, even in so-called recovery. Wasn't using, but I was searching, searching. What is it that I couldn't seem to get? Because I had this misconception about God. I thought it was something out there, that something that had been impressed upon me in Sunday school as a kid, that, and from, different religions, that it was out there, and I really was convinced that I could understand it if I, could grasp it, that I would be able to manage my life, and I really had to lose everything, even in recovery, to recognize it. I couldn't. I had to surrender to the moment, and so that's the deal, and it isn't that difficult. I'm more than willing to talk about how that happened for me over and over and over again, because sometimes it has to be impressed upon us. How do we let go of all of our ideas? How do we let go of managing the show? How do we let go of our identities? I had all these stories about myself, that I'm this and I'm that, and I had to let it all go. And I can, help you with that. That's my deal. That's the thing now, and there is freedom. Like literally, there is freedom, and it's not complicated. Wouldn't you like to be free in each moment? The fourth dimension. It talks about in the 12 steps. We talk about, we're catapulted or skyrocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. Wow, and happy, joyous, and free. It's possible. It's really possible. It's not through learning a new doctrine. You know, it's not through getting a new set of belief systems. It's not through, you know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going to workshops and kind of shedding stuff. I think that if that's the route you want to take, William James called, you know, the awakening of the spiritual awakening of the educational variety. You know, but it doesn't have to take 30 years. It really doesn't, and because I can say that because I know it's happened for me, and it's not that complicated. Okay, so that's my message today. You know, just a little footnote to all that. As you look around ourselves today, and there seems to be a lot of stuff going on, especially around you know, the thing that's happening with COVID and all that, and you know, just find the middle ground. You know, we want to position ourselves, and it's our position that keeps us from being free. You know, find the middle ground. There's there's a real need for us to be in the middle ground, and to love everybody no matter what their position is, you know, and you know, we're surrounded by a lot of confusion right now, and this will pass. This will pass, and so yeah, these are really, I think, amazing times, because out of this will come, I think, phenomenal awareness. I don't want to call it growth, but it really isn't growth. It's more like consciousness. We will realize that we, you know, this need to know can be let go, and we can just be present in love with our families and all of that. That's my little piece on that today. You know, I have lots of friends that are very opinionated. They're certain that this is the way, whatever it happens to be, that they're certain about. And I just want to say, you know, just, you know, breathe, come into the moment, find a place of love and acceptance for all, you know, because that is our code. Love and tolerance, love and kindness is our code. You know, if there is a code, if there's a way to live, you know, in the moment, it is, I believe, with love and kindness. So I've been reading from the Tao Te Ching as we've been doing these little talks, and I'm going to read again today. Stephen Mitchell. It's a beautiful little book. Stephen Mitchell's interpretation on chapter 66. And it's just 3 paragraphs. It's beautiful. All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. So the sea is lower, and it says humility gives it its power. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them. The master is above the people, and no one feels oppressed. She goes ahead of the people, and no one feels manipulated. The whole world is grateful to her because she competes with no one. No one can compete with her. Beautiful. I mean, there's such great little messages in this book, and it's all part of the awakening process, you know, to expose ourselves to the great teachings. Okay, love you guys. Love it if you go to YouTube and subscribe and comment, and if anybody just wants to chat, I'm available. Call, text, I'll call you, and let's talk about freedom. Freedom in this moment. Okay, love you lots.